Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Baz Dan for sending in some awesome pictures of his L51 Sherman Russ. Looks absolutely fantastic, based on the Israeli M51 Super Sherman. Really cool kit. And in fact, if those of you that have followed the channel for a while will have seen that Baz has sent in multiple pictures, and I always use them because they're always really good. So thank you for sending these pictures in, Baz, and I've included lots of the pictures that have shown the conversion and the effort that's gone into making this thing, and the fact that it's got sponsors and you've put different coloured bullets on top and all that kind of stuff. Really nice, fine detail, and always a pleasure to show off some of Baz's pictures. So thank you for sending these in, mate. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page or email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. Now don't worry if you're an Ogun that hasn't had his bonehead surgery yet and you can't remember that, there will be a link to the Facebook page and an email address down in the description below, so go and check that out. Now without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now today, guys, I want to cover the age-old question of, do you have lots and lots of crappy stuff or a few elite hardcore things? Essentially, quantity versus quality, boys or toys. These are the questions that pretty much every Warhammer player, but especially Guard commanders, have to ask ourselves. You see, the Guard is a really varied faction. We can bring a pretty, well, hyper elite armies in the form of Scions, or we can bring extremely hoardy armies such as, you know, conscript spam and things like that, and just pure infantry. Now obviously you can Google or YouTube this concept and you'll find forum after forum and post after post talking about generalizations of Guard and boys over toys and all this kind of stuff. But what I want to talk about, I want to take it a step further. I want to drill down into this idea, but very much focused in on the lens of 9th edition. Okay, and also very much in the current meta that we find ourselves in. So before we go and ask the question, we need to set the stage. And we need to look at what is the current meta. Now, the current meta and the thing with 9th edition is it comes down to durability. Durability is key. But what we're seeing a lot of, even with factions like Dark Elder, like Drukhari, who are famous for being pretty glass hammery, what we're seeing a lot of is multiple wound units. So things like Reaver jet bikes and Hellions for Dark Elder. Things like Plague Marines across, you know, and Blightlord Terminators across the board, having multiple wounds but also having a built-in damage reduction. For Space Marines, even your basic Tactical Marine has now got 2 wounds, and Scouts have been moved into the elite section, so you're not going to see those very much. So the 1 wound infantry has been pushed to one side, and the mainstay infantry for Marines has been given additional wound. Now you could argue mainstay infantry, yes, before you cancel, of course intercessors are also a mainstay infantry, but what we're saying is all the main infantry in Marines has got 2 wounds now. Now to be fair, can't forget about the old Necrons. They don't have 2 wounds each, but they do have essentially an inbuilt 5+ feel no pain that ignores all damage, because you don't take it per wound, per damage, you just take it like, do I get back up on a 5+? And not to forget that their Immortals have moved to toughness 5 now. So they have a combination, yes they've only got 1 wound, but their main you do see warrior blobs, of course, and you do see Immortals, and both of one of those units has got a 5+, has got a toughness 5, and the other unit has got a 5+ to get back up, and multiple ways of boosting that, so it makes them very durable. So we're seeing a lot of durability, and we're also seeing a lot of killing power ramping up. The way Games Workshop is balancing these things out is by everyone's getting more and more durable by and large. Dark Elder definitely not in many ways, although they have had extra runes sprinkled here and there. But by and large, everyone is getting more durable, but also everyone is getting far more killy. The firepower output is really going up. And we are seeing this with damage to heavy bolters. We are seeing this with multiple weapon systems moving from a random D6 damage to a flat damage plus a D3, or just a flat damage. So all the Dark Elder weapons have moved over to pretty much D3 or D2 Sorry, have all moved over to damage 2 or damage 3 with then a random thing applied on top, either a d6 or a d2. So they're doing a minimum of 3 or 4 damage is what we're saying. If you've seen any of the leaks for other factions, it looks like Adeptus Mechanicus, their Cognis las cannons are also getting flat damage 3 with a d3 on top of that. Now we don't know if that's going to spread to the rest of the factions. Admech do have the best tech, so then maybe everyone else gets stuck with random d6 and they get better stuff. That's not the point of this video, so let's move on. But what I'm saying is we're seeing a lot more damage output as well. Now, what this means is you essentially, as a guard player, have to make a decision. And I am not necessarily going to point you in one direction and say one way is better than the other. But I feel like we have to commit to a path. I feel like the age of hybrid guard, aka a mixture, a balanced mixture of tanks and infantry, is very much not the way to go with guard at the moment. Because it means you don't have enough killing stuff to do damage, and you don't have enough infantry to be durable. Okay? Because that's where you might think your guard tanks are durable. Unless you really spam the armor, they're not. And likewise, if you don't have enough infantry, then you won't have any durability there. So what it comes down to, so now you know the stage. We've got more durability, we've got more killing power, and we also have, very important fact to take into account, smaller board sizes. I know this seems like old news, but it's all very important stuff to understand, which means that getting onto those middle objectives, which is what we're all about, is very important. So that's the stage. I know it seems like I've spent 5-6 minutes covering old ground, but it's really important to set that stage before we then discuss the next thing. So now that we've set the meta, let's go through briefly the 2 ways you can go. You have Horde, you have quantity versus quality, okay? And quantity is where you dedicate yourself to the idea of, I am not overly bothered about doing a huge amount of damage in one hit, okay? I still want to do damage, of course. It's very difficult to win a game of 40k without doing damage, but I don't need to have one hit wallop of wonders. My damage will come from a death from 1,000 cuts. If every infantry squad is only going to do 1 wound or 2 wounds, then I will take 18 infantry squads and in one turn will do lots of damage, but not from one individual unit. And I'm going to instead take as many bodies as possible. This is typically what I run as a pure infantry commander. And when you run this style, you'll be looking at a list which has a minimum of 200 bodies hitting the field. Now, they don't all need to be guardsmen. I have a 200 body list, which has 15 abhumans in it, 9 Bulgrin, 5 Ogrin, and then a load of other infantry backing it up. So you're looking at 200 bodies minimum, but all of it is pretty much, by and large, if you really dedicate to this, you're looking at 250 infantry. Okay? That is still very possible. Even with all the points increases and craziness that's happened in 9th edition latest FAQs, still very easy to get to 270 infantry and have 50 points left over to spend on fun stuff. The way you do it, 3 battalions, 15 infantry squads, 3 blocks of conscripts, blah, blah, blah. So that, heavy weapon teams, officers, all that kind of stuff. That's one way of going. And the idea with this is that I'm going to grind you down and I'm going to flood the middle of the board and I am going to outlast you. I'm going to stop you from winning on primary points because you're not going to get any primary points because I'm going to hold, you're only going to have one objective the whole game, and my idea is to have every objective possible every turn. That's the quantity approach. The quality approach, you go entirely the other way. With this approach, you take the absolute minimum amount of infantry that you have to, and instead go for as much killing power as possible. This is often called min-maxing, where you take minimum amount of tax, maximum amount of firepower. This is a technique which is very popular with many factions in 40k at the moment. You take the minimum amount of troops and you take the maximum amount of elite stuff, and This is why 9th edition is often seen as the elite army's game, as the elite man's game. That's what it's seen as. Because you have people who are turning up with 3 squads of intercessors and they just sit on a backfield objective, and then everything else is things like Blade Guard veterans, or if you're running armies like Sisters, you take the minimum amount of Sisters and you run as much Repentia as possible. There's lots of ways, although to be fair, you do tend to see Sisters a few more than that. But a lot of people prefer to min-max. Now, min-maxing is actually, I would argue, the way that many people just default to. Because most people don't, unless you're a lunatic like me that loves the basic guardsman, most people don't like the basic bitch stuff. Most people want the really cool tanks. You know, they want the Bane Blades, they want the Lehman Russes, or if you're another player, you want your repulsors. I don't know, that's a great example, but you know what I mean. You want your big boom stuff. You want stuff that does damage. You want to drop down 10 Deathwing Terminators. That's the cool stuff. You don't care about your 5 Intercessors chilling at the back. So a lot of people will default that way. And the thing with elite infantry is they tend to be point for point. Really, really powerful and also really, really durable. But the thing is, you don't get very many of them. So a spate of bad luck can, or just a few unlucky dice rolls, can really gut the army. But by and large, it tends to be the way that a lot of people default to. So now you understand the 2 different kinds of army. You understand the setting and the stage and the meta. What is the best? What is the best thing to do in 9th? Can we analyse that? Can we point that out? So I want to frame this next part in the lens and put it in the lens of this from a guard perspective. We've talked quite generally up to this point, but now let's put it into focus from a guard's point of view. It is difficult to say which path is better. I have seen success with both. But what I will do is I will give you some advice on each path. And then I suppose and then some examples and strengths and weaknesses of each path, specifically using examples for the Ashman-Atar and for the Imperial Guard. So let's start off with the min-maxing side of things. If you're going to min-max, then you are probably going to turn up to the battlefield with less than 50 infantry. Okay, you're even if you really want to take it to an absolute extreme, you can turn up to the battlefield with 15 infantry, 3 squads of 5 Scions. And hell, thanks to Latest FAQ, you can even give each one of them a plasma pistol for free. Not each Scion, each squad sergeant. That will only cost you 145 points times 3, 135 points. That leaves you with 1,800 odd points to spend on all the killing power you can come up with. That's 3 tank commanders. If you're going down the Pask route, Acadian route, that's 4 tank commanders. If you want to Imperial Guard soup, you could take 3 tank commanders, Pask, and then if you take one of the detachments as Vostroyan and take another regular Lehman Russ, you can then essentially turn that Lehman Russ into a pseudo tank commander by using Vostroyan Pride. So if you really want to go down as much firepower as possible, you can get yourself 5 tank commanders, essentially. Okay, I've talked about this in a previous video, how that is kind of the maximum you can get. On top of that, you can throw on 2 full payload Manticores, and you'll probably still have some points left over for a Bullgrin squad or 2. Okay? It's napkin maths here. I mean, you have to play around with it. But my point is, if you'll turn up to the battlefield with 5 Lehman Russes hitting on 2s or 3s, you could take the Martial Cannons on every single one of them. And have 2 Manticores in the back with flat damage 3. And then you can take a couple of squads of Bullgrins. And all your Scions need to do is deep strike onto an objective, hold an objective here and there, maybe get scramblers or something. So what's the advantage of this kind of list? The advantage is you have an ungodly amount of firepower. Okay, you will genuinely, even some of the hardest armies out there like Death Guard, you're going to flatten them. Okay, if you've got 5 Martial Cannons, and then you've got 5 Martial Cannons, and then you've got 2 Manticores on top of that. I mean, that's an insane amount of firepower. Okay, so you're going to kill stuff. However, the weakness of this list is that you will be at risk of losing on primaries. You'll be struggling on primary potentially, and you're also quite badly at risk of getting boxed into your deployment zone. You have a ton of firepower, but that isn't necessarily going to save you from Harlequins or Dark Elder, two very fast and very competitive armies at the moment, who will charge up to you, and then they'll tie every tank up in combat. And they don't really care. They don't really care if you've got multi-melters in every tank. They can afford to, you're going to struggle to kick them off. So that is the risk. Now this kind of list used to be a lot riskier. It's nowhere near as risky, because even if people tie you up in combat now, you've got multi-melters and las cannons or whatever, or sponsor weapons and hull weapons on every vehicle. So you probably shoot your way out eventually, before they even do a huge amount of damage to you. But you will be at risk of losing on primary. Secondaries also, for that kind of list, you could potentially bleed a lot of secondaries, because each one of those vehicles is going to be giving away 2 victory points if I bring it down. You've got 7 vehicles. Someone could easily score 14 victory points against you. So the problem is that it could bleed secondaries and may struggle on primaries. But if you are able to bring all your firepower to bear on one turn, you might win the game in one shooting phase. No exaggeration. Which is quite rare for Guard. Often it takes us a couple of shooting phases to really grind the enemy down. It can be in balance. This style of army can win in one shooting phase. I'm not even exaggerating. Okay, you'll be putting the fact that a lot of games which are doing a lot to combat 3+ available saves. No one's getting better than a 4+ save against you, and they're often getting hit with big D6 damage weapons. It's horrendous. So it will have the firepower, but it will be difficult to tie up now, thanks to 9th edition. But you are at risk of bleeding a certain secondary. It's unlikely they'd get all your vehicles, though, to be fair. But you're more at risk. You're less at risk of being secondaries. You're more at risk of struggling on primaries. Okay. The other kind of list is quantity. It's Horde, one I am more familiar with and have more. Actually, to be fair, I would say that, but pretty much for the whole of 8th edition, I use my Steel Legion competitively, and that's like the previous list. That's a lot of tanks. So I actually have broadened my perspective on this now, and I can see it from both sides. But the second kind of list, the second kind of thing is the quantity approach, and we'll talk about that now, and give you an example of a list that is really good from the quantity approach. So as I've mentioned before, so I won't go into too much detail on it now, this is about bodies. This is purely about bodies, and it's about getting as many wounds on the table as possible. Now, this is the list that I often run, and it's pure infantry, and it's one that I'm looking to try and take to the next tournament I'm going to, which is going to be in July. So tournaments are really, it's opening back up in the UK, which is good. My list that I would typically run in a pure infantry army is, I'm looking at 3 battalions, so I'm struggling with CP, and I am looking at taking maximum amount of infantry squads, and if I'm not taking maximum amount of infantry squads, it's because I'm swapping an infantry squad or 2 out for a max size conscript blob or 2. So a current list that I'm thinking of, seriously, I may not actually get it done in time for the next tournament, but we'll try, is 15 infantry squads, 3 conscript blobs, 3 heavy weapon teams, and 6 officers and 3 commissars. And it comes to, I believe, I may have missed something out, but I believe it comes to 267 models. That is the list that I'm thinking of running. It has no ballistic skill 3+ on any of the main units. And it has 15 infantry squads. Every single one of those infantry squads is equipped with either a plasma or a melter and a heavy bolter or a autocannon. In fact, and I have 50 points left over, so if I really want to, I could upgrade a lot of those weapons. I could upgrade 10 of them to las cannons or missile launchers. But I have basically no ballistic skill 3+. So my damage output is not high from my heavy weapons. I had to take some heavy weapons because I can't. las guns cannot bring everything down as much as I wish they could. So So what are the advantages of this kind of list? Well, the advantage is that there's a few advantages. The advantage is that you are going to fill your deployment zone and you are going to fill half the table easily. Okay. And you're going to have great board control with this kind of list. There's two ways you can get board control. You can be maneuverable or you can be everywhere. There's two ways of getting board control. And the way that I like guards to get board control is by being everywhere. So people can't deep strike into you. The conscripts or other units provide great screening capability. So people that want to deep strike in won't get to pick their favourite targets. And the other advantage of this is that there's no obvious target for your opponent to pick. Okay, when you have things like hybrid lists which have tank commanders and some infantry, it's very easy to kick the legs out from underneath a list like that because your damage dealers are out in the open and obvious. Those three Leman Russ Demolisher tank commanders need to go. With this kind of list, there is no obvious weak point. There is no, oh, I will target that unit and it will kick the legs out from underneath it. You're killing infantry, and nearly all of it is sacrificial. The conscripts are more sacrificial than the guardsmen, but the guardsmen are still plenty sacrificial. And that is the advantage of the list. It is not easy to kick the legs out from under it. You can be everywhere, and it really plays to the strengths of the primary mission. You are going to be on a lot of primary. You need to, with this kind of list, you have to push forward constantly because you can't just sit back with half your infantry. You need to be pushing forward. Enemies can't get into your deployment zone. They're going, and if they do, you'll be able to, like the immune system, you'll surround them with white blood cells, aka guardsmen, and you'll just kill them. So that is the advantage. You will be playing the primary games. Also, relatively easy for you to pick secondaries that you don't really need to kill your opponent on. Raise the banners high is great for this because once you've got a banner up, they are going to really struggle to take it down because to raise a banner can be a little difficult. You know, there has to be no enemies nearby, but for them to take it down, they have to control the objective. So once the banner's up and you've got your whole army's obsec essentially, it's difficult for them to take that banner down. Now, what are the disadvantages of this? Okay, disadvantages are that you are going to give away 15 secondary points every single game without fail because the enemy is going to take one look at your list and go thin their ranks. And you will struggle to deny them from killing 150 infantry. You will struggle to deny them. Unless they are a combat army and they just smash into your conscript screen and then everyone behind them just wipes them out in a blaze of first rank fire, second rank fire, lasgun fire, which I have done. And if you want an example of this, is when I played Winter's SEO on his channel and he smashed into my lines with loads of gene stealers and he killed the front wave, and then in return I lasgunned away pretty much his whole army, and he actually ended up getting less than the rank points than me, I believe, or we got about an equal amount, even though I brought so many more models than him. So it's not guaranteed you're going to give away 15th in the ranks, but it's highly likely you're going to give away a lot of thin the ranks points. And your army is very easy to pick secondaries against. Thin the ranks, assassinate. Your army bleeds secondaries, and the skill to piloting that army is to try and minimise that bleed as much as possible. Put as many sticking plasters, bandages, whatever you can. You will have to give away some points, but if you can feed the enemy certain units, it can help. It can help. So that is one way. That's one weakness of it. The other weakness is that it doesn't have a great amount of damage output, and there are some armies out there which can chew through 270 guardsmen. There are armies out there which can do it. I have run armies this size before and I have been tabled. Not in 9th edition, bear in mind, but not in 8th edition, bear in mind, but in 7th edition it happened. It's okay, so that's the sort of the issues. However, if I was to say, there's also one other thing to take into account when comparing these two army styles, which is, what are other people taking? What are other people expecting to face? And the answer is, no one is really expecting to face a horde that big. People are expecting to face 90 orcs. That's the current top horde army. 90 orcs is the current top horde. That's not a good list. That's not a good horde, I should say. People think 90 orcs is a horde. It's not a horde. 270 guardsmen is a horde. It's extreme. It's excessive. It's gnarly. So because people are not expecting to face hordes, there is a great and everyone is geared up with, oh, I don't know, Melter, because this is the addition of Melter. And a lot of armies are going to counter the Melter spam and whatnot. They're going even eliter and even more durable. You know, you've got Terminators with 4+ saves and reducing damage, all this kind of stuff. So that's how a lot of people are dealing with it. They're going for model by model durability. The other way to do it is, but that means that people are going even more and more into Melter and multi-melter stuff like that. If someone turns up, if the top sisters list turns up against the 270 guardsmen list that I described, and they've got 15 retributors all with multi-melters, and they've got 30 repentia all ready to just chop the crap out of me, I am confident that I would win that game. I'm very confident I would win that game. Because the repentia will come in and they will slaughter my conscripts. I know that. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because then I'm going to kill every single one of those repentia in a hail of literally 1,000 lasgun shots. And I'm not exaggerating. It is 1,000 lasgun shots or more in one turn. Okay. You've got 18 squads. 11 of those squads are putting out, maybe I am exaggerating actually, but 500 lasgun shots in a turn is what we're looking at. Plus all the special and heavy weapons. We're talking, it's a lot of DACA. And the great thing about lasguns is they don't care if you're strength, they don't care what fancy rules you've got. If you're toughness 3 and they can wound you on 4s, they are going to butcher you. And then you've got a bunch of repentia running around who have all got multi-melters and who are going to like annihilate a squad of guardsmen, but then they're only toughness 3. And I don't care if you're only toughness 3. So I'm going to lasgun them to death. And they have other units, of course, you know. They have other units, and they will, and I'm sure I'll lose 150 guardsmen against at least when the mortifiers and all that kind of stuff starts coming in. But yeah, I have a good screen, and then it's like, okay, well, what about Death Guard and stuff like that? The point is that when you face Death Guard or Heavy Intercessors or Raven Wing or Dark Elder with toughness 5, this list still doesn't care because it wounds everything on 5s and it has a huge amount of damage output. So that is another thing to bear in mind. A lot of people have got a lot more durable, but they've got but the current meta is everything's being boosted up to like toughness 5, essentially. And you don't care about that with this kind of list. Whereas other armies definitely do care about going up to toughness 5 because it means Melter wounds them on 3s rather than 2s. Whereas Melter's always wounded you on 2s, so you don't really care. That's one thing to mention. However, I would be balanced and fair in my assessment by saying if you're running an absolute crapload of Demolisher Cannons and Manticores, you're wounding everything on 2s. If it's toughness 5 or toughness 4, you don't care. However, multi-melter, retributors and eradicators, 15 to 18 eradicators are going to do a lot of damage. They're going to kill 3 of your tanks in a turn. So, but then I guess the idea is, okay, so those eradicators come in, those multi-melter retributors come in, they kill 3 of my big damage dealing units, but I still have 4 left, which is more than or the same as what many hybrid guard lists start with. And and then when you can take out their anti-tank units, you're golden. You are absolutely golden. But it's tricky. It's tricky. So those are the two extremes. Those are the two current tactics that I would advocate. Is one better than the other? You know what? I don't think we know yet. I would say, look, there was a tournament in Australia. Someone took the most elite guard army I've seen, and they came second. So you know what? I am more than willing to say, look, 9th edition is the edition of the hyper elite guard, and we can do it because we can do anything because we're the guard. We literally have that unit size, that variety. But I would also say that I don't think we've seen a lot of pure infantry guard commanders go to tournaments yet, because it's been difficult to attend. It's been difficult to attend a lot of events, and a lot of people don't have that many models. And I feel like a lot of guard players are really sticking to the old COVID restrictions. I definitely feel like that's what we're seeing. There is one final point I want to make regarding both of these routes. Right now, I want to just be clear. Right now, I am on the fence. I have seen evidence that both routes are very valid, and I think we simply need more battlefield data. My bias, you could call it, but my instinct is that the pure infantry is the way to go. But I am very much seeing evidence. I'm seeing Scions do well. I am seeing that crazy Australian list doing well. So I'm very much open-minded, and I am totally open to the fact that going hyper-elite guard might be the way to go. However, there is one thing I want to mention. We are getting to this point again, where we were in 7th, as we are in 9th, where there's so much killing ability out there that it doesn't matter how elite you are, unless you are, well, from a guard perspective we're talking about. From a guard perspective, it doesn't matter how elite you are, how durable you are, people have the ability to just remove anything that you put on the table. Whether it's tough, and toughness starts, and saves start becoming irrelevant. Now this is very much a specific guard point. There are many factions out there which can go really, really elite and really, really durable, and they can weather the firepower storm. Guard can't do that because we don't tend to get a lot of invulnerable saves. Ogryns, Bullgryns are an exception, but by and large, our big things rely upon toughness and good saves to survive. We are rapidly approaching the stage, especially with the release of the Dark Elder book, where it simply does not matter what toughness you are, and it simply does not matter what save you are, because everything is dying so easily. I mean, it only takes 2 and a bit blasters to kill a tank, and they're only 10 points each. Well, bear in mind if they hit and wound, I should say. It probably takes about 5 blasters to kill a Leman Russ. But we're rapidly approaching the point where it just comes down to pure and simple, how many wounds can you put on the table? And if you're putting down 100 wounds worth of armour versus 200 to 300 wounds of pure infantry, then the pure infantry is more durable, because those tanks, their durability, their toughness, their save doesn't mean anything, because everyone is so powerful. And we are rapidly approaching this step. And so my instinct is, if things keep going in the manner they're going in, we are going to see pure infantry guard become the new normal again for guard players. But I'm not seeing, that's my instinct, that's my prediction, that's what I'm currently thinking of. The problem with pure infantry guard is you have to get really fast at running it, especially in a timed tournament situation. But right now, it's on the fence. I think right now it could go either way. And I think as a player, you can choose which way you want to go. And I think both ways will be particularly valid. Honourable mention, very last thing, this video's gone a bit longer than I wanted it to. Scions. I'm going to do a separate video on Scions, discussing the Scion meta, sort of reanalysing it a few months on. But Scions naturally lend themselves to being an elite army, and we are seeing bubbles, we are seeing ripples in the meta that Scions are doing very well, because they bring great firepower, they are elite, and they're actually quite spammable. You can turn up with 100 Scions and all the trimmings, no problemo. So I think Scions are in a really, really good place. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave lots and lots of feedback. Please let me know what you think. Do you think we are yet at the, it just comes down to wounds, it comes down to guardsmen, or do you think hyper elite is the way to go? As many Bullgryns, as many tank commanders, as many manticores as we can get in there, and just the minimum amount of infantry possible. Let me know what your preference is and what you think is the right way to go in the current meta. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.